Hello, everybody, and welcome to another PMP end of month review. What is that? Well, that is the end of month review for our Painters Motivating Painters Facebook hobby group. So, that is our Facebook community focused on taking your next step on your hobby journey. If you're interested in joining us on the hobby journey, you can find a link down below. And we would love to have you, whether you're a new painter or a longtime master, it doesn't matter. If you've got a next step to take, we'd like to take it with you. So every month we give our members the opportunity to post a single miniature into a monthly review event we create. You can find it under the events tab on the Facebook page. There are instructions pinned to the top that are and ask for targeted feedback on a project that they've completed from myself and other members of the group. This month it's just me because we're working on a new recording method, so I'm figuring this all out. YouTube has continued to change this. I will let you in behind the curtain and let you know that I recorded this entire thing, more than 3 hours of talking, and the video didn't render properly, and I lost the whole thing. So this is take two. So I know all of these models now quite intimately, and I'm ready to discuss them. As usual, we do limit you to one post per month. There's just a lot of posts, and even if I took 5 minutes per post to give sort of full detailed stuff, I would end up being here for 5 hours. I don't mind doing this. I like doing this actually, but I have my limits on my time, and I hope everybody finds this useful. To that end, I recorded a companion video, which will be releasing like either right before or right after this one, but you should find it on my channel, wherein I walk you through a lot of the common things I'm going to talk about: hair, gems, bone, NMM, and contrast, as well as contrast on true metallic metal. And those are really like those 6 things are the most common feedback I'm going to give. Okay. So please go reference that video. I explain it in detail. If I say you need more contrast on your in your miniature or on this, or you need to change the way your hair is working, that video can be a good reference. All right. So with that being said, let's jump right into it. Start off with Kyle, who brings us a blood elf from Warcraft and wants to know about how to make the red brighter without it going pink or orange. Common question. Bright red is a matter of white undershading. Red is very naturally transparent. So in this area here, like up here and on the top of the shoulder, maybe on the top of the glove, what we would do is we would lay down some ivory. You go into your yellow, brown, whites, and then you put red glaze over the top of it. A single red glaze, it'll turn pink. A second red glaze, you'll get a really intense red. So it's just a matter of a couple glazes and you will pop that right up. I have a video tutorial on this on my channel, how to paint bright red. So go check that out. I would also point out, Kyle, you'll want to work on adding some more contrast into your true metallic metals. They're a little flat right now. Okay. Next up, we've got Joel Coronado with his first attempt with NMM. So let's take a look here at this image because it'll show us what we need. He's just looking for kind of general feedback on that. You're running a nice range of colors. You want to think about secondary reflections. So I talk about this a little in the item, but as well, you've got the good transition running. You want to come to a little more white in a few places. Think about some hot spots. Raza Miniature Painting, Darren Latham's blog, has a great discussion about hot spots and creating light through that. But this is good. The only thing you're really missing is edges. Whenever you're doing non-metallic metal, you really need to make sure that you have edges. Everything needs to be edged. The edge of the armor, these plates, the axe, this line right here on the center of the axe. All of those need to be cut with a very clear, sharp, thin white line. You may also want to think about interference, chips and dots, things like that show imperfections in the metal. Those help sell the effect rather than just one smooth blend over the whole thing. You may also want to think about integrating a color. So, for example, on the axe, we could have a little yellow-brown in our mid area here. And again, that will help sell the effect because shiny reflective metal that's going up to white reflection is going to naturally reflect colors and light in the environment around it. So you want to make sure you capture that with a little bit of light pollution in the color. All right, next up, Alan Thomas with a Sisters Admech Knight Armature. So let's take a look at this. Obviously, this is right in my wheelhouse. Wanted to know about panel modulation. So overall, I feel this is a really strong knight. Your colors are really strong. Your freehand is good. Your hazard stripes look great. The plasma, the heat effect on the barrels looks really good. My best advice, the pigment and dust on the feet looks good. Let's talk about where our areas of opportunity are. So first off, we can take the panel modulation a little bit farther. The red is a little weak. The white is non-existent. So you want to make sure you shade that some. Let's get some more color and tonal variation into that. Secondly, a little bit of battle damage, chipping, or weathering, we'll see it on the next night, is actually, I think, going to be very beneficial here. I'm not asking you to turn this thing into an Orky vehicle. It doesn't need to be that. But just some hits here and there to like show that this thing is a machine of war and is not a living thing and has some scratches, some dots, a few streaks, some weathering. The dust on the feet's a good step. Let's go a little farther. Okay. You may also want to think about expanding the size of the freehand here on the main carapace, only because when you have that much negative space, breaking it up is what freehand is doing. But you could also do that with things like damage or some cuts or stuff like that. But overall, this is a really great looking knight. On the base, which is another thing you asked about, it's kind of flat and boring. My advice would be let's mix some color in there. Show me some crimson rust, some orange rust, some brown, some stains, some blah, da, 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 da. Break it up with some more color. Gray is not very exciting. I like the hazard stripes, but we can go farther. So that's what I'll say. Overall, really, really beautiful knight. Next up, Alex brings us another knight. I knew this was coming because, again, I've done this all before. So with this one, again, better on the panel modulation. I like it. Really nice color tones there on the red. Could still go a little farther with the white, I suspect, though I really like. It's subtle, but you could go a little bit farther. Now, this is the shot I wanted to go to because this is exactly the kind of damage I'm talking about. It's not large. You notice that you just got some minor hits here where like shrapnel hit it, a nice scratch here where probably a bullet or something came across, a little bit of chipping on the edge. This is perfect. A little bit of streaking. Yes, this I love. My advice for you, Alex, is mainly around, one, drill out that top gun barrel. You thought I wasn't going to notice? I always notice, okay? I always notice, folks. Drill your gun barrels. Two, I would focus on a little more variation in the metal itself. Let's get a dark black-brown color and kind of get some more of those shadows built in there. The steel is very bright. You have good lining, and I like that. Looks like you did an oil wash. And we need a little more heavier shadows on the lower parts of the metal. That's the only thing that jumps out at me, really. Freehand fleur-de-lis looks absolutely fantabulous. Love it. Lastly, when you're using cork, don't make it look like cork. We need to break this up more. Chip it, put paste over it, mess around with it, put stuff on top of it, grit it out, something. It still looks like he's standing on cork. Okay. Next up, Ewan asking about some non-metallic metal. Obviously, he's only on the horse. The horseman himself is flat, and he's not painted yet, so we'll focus on the horse. See my previous comments about secondary reflections here in the lower parts. Color, again, would be a good thing. Used a little bit of a purple tone, which I do like, but mixing that in a little more would be strong. You need to expand the volume here slightly, like especially toward the backside. Assumingly you've told me your light is coming like this. So the light volume of the highlight should actually get broader here and be thinner here along the line. But working in like a color into this, a blue, a yellow, a brown, something like that would go strong. Also, we need to make sure our edges are strong. You've got nice lines here. You'll want to make sure they're nice and thin. But on the bottom here on all this, as well as some light catches. See, the light catches are just where you take a little dot of white paint and just hit little dots of light, where light would normally be sort of like reflecting in a broad way. They usually look best when you place them against the darkest area or something like that. My other thing would be make sure all your rivets have a nice dark black circle around them and the rivets themselves are white. Things like that can really help break it up. But overall, I think your light placement is good, and it's certainly strong. You just want to make sure we kind of smooth out our blends a little bit, add in that interference color, and adjust our volumes. But overall, good work. Okay, Maroc, feedback, fur, and skin, fur, and color composition. So, Maroc, your challenge with color composition is that you're not really painting with colors. And what I mean by that is his fur is mostly white, his skin is purple, and the tree is orange, but they're such heavily desaturated versions of that like there's just not much visual interest here. I will say the skin is fantastic. I love it. I love the way you've run this. You've got blues and dark purples down in there. It looks great. So when I talk later about skin needing more visual interest, because that's going to come up, I'd like people to refer back to this. This is what I'm talking about, how he's got it. He's really taken some great shadows. The musculature is well defined, and he uses different colors in it for this. Now on to the white. The white's boring, because white is a just pretty boring color. My best advice would be think about things to mix that up. So have some deeper browns or grays or reds around his mouth, his nose, under his eyes. Just kind of work that in. Work in a little blue into lower sections. Have stripes or a pattern of some kind on him. I mean, I know he's not a tiger, but he's a weird werewolf. His fur can look like whatever it wants to look like, right? So just something to break up all that white more than what's currently there would, I think, increase your visual interest. But overall, this looks really good, and I think it's a strong submission. But think about how you can go off book, as it were, to have more interesting visual elements, right? In the white fur. Okay. Next up, Juan Francisco Gonzalez Hidalgo, the greatest name in the PMP. Juan, I love your name so much. All right. Brings us this piece. He says he really tries to push the contrast. This is great. Looks like a GW piece of box art. So, excellent work. I do have some feedback for you. My feedback is some of your transitions on the blue to highlights are a little sharp and subtle, are a little sharp and not as subtle as they could be. So like when we look in this area here, 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 a little bit more volume in the mid-tone, smoothing that out would be really good, especially on these broad flats where, where more light would just naturally be filtering through. So you may want to think about that. The hair looks so wonderful. I love everything about it. It's glorious. It's glorious. Yes. That's all I can say. Looking over here at her face, boom, Facebook knows it's a face, so that's a win. A little bit more of sort of darker tones here in the neck, especially, under her chin. A little bit more purple glazing down here, bringing a little bit more pink and stuff into the cheekbone to reshape that, and a little bit more around the eye could all be areas you want to improve on, as well as right here in the nose. Okay. I like having myself on camera now because I can actually talk about stuff like that and point to my own face. In the past, I've just had to kind of go right here. It's not as easy. So, hey, that's a good new thing. Finally, on the metals, when you're doing this silver edging, just go back in with your gold and push really to the edge. I also would be careful about edging the whole thing. It kind of looks a bit odd when the whole thing has the silver edging. So you may just want to think about doing one side of it. But overall, this is really beautiful. Just gorgeous, gorgeous work. And I love her. She looks wonderful. All right. Nick Curtin doing some 3D printed terrain. Buddy, aren't we all? So he's looking for tips and tricks to go faster. Well, one, have an airbrush. So let's assume you got that out of the way. And a lot of filters. Just quick, very thin inks and stuff to filter colors over things. It's a good way once you've got your base colors down. Two, raw pigment. I use a lot of raw pigment in painting terrain, wherein I'll just take a big brush, get into that pigment, start stippling stuff around. So greens and purples into the bark to make that more visually interesting and look like moss and weather. Some deep reds and browns and greens into the rocks, and same thing. Up here, you can get a soft clay color and stuff like that to color the stone and make it have a slightly more pink feeling, as though it's got some different rock in it that's like a terracotta that's maybe making it a little more visually interesting. Little stuff like that, just base paints, and then the third point would be an oil wash. Oil washes are great for big pieces of terrain. You can use lots of different colors. It's easy to clean up afterwards. Between doing filters with the airbrush and doing some heavy pigment work and oil washing, you can get incredible tonal variation very fast and with minimal effort. You do need to let your oil wash dry for at least 24 hours, but other than that, it's what I found to be a good trick. I'll be sharing a piece here shortly that kind of gives you an idea of the thing, of what I'm talking about. Some of my use of it in action, but I hope that helps. All right, next up, Jed with his first time posting, and he's looking for comments on the NMM. I'm going to actually jump straight to this picture. And here's what I'll say. Jed, the other pictures, throw them out. That yellow light is so strong, it completely miscolors your entire piece, right? So this is good lighting. Just have this lighting, put a white background behind it, and you've got a winner, okay? Because it's nice, it's diffuse, it's not overtly sharp. Like, could it be better? Sure, but this is much better lighting showing true color than the other piece. All right, now on to your questions about NMM. So, in general, we're missing a little bit of the richness of our midtone here. So it's kind of flat, kind of lifeless. A little bit more ochre into the gold color will make it feel a lot stronger. So like we're so desaturated on the yellow that it feels flat, right? And we want it to feel shiny, and that comes through that mid-high tone of the high ochre and ochre white. The next thing I would say is make sure everything is edged and you have the transitions going accordingly. So like here on this armbands are a good example. You know, we want to make sure that you've got a little bit of white here to where it caught the light, but it could be stronger, and we could be running transitions on each one of these little squares. You kind of are tracing the whole volume, but you didn't catch each one of them individually, right? So I'd like to see a little bit more of the individuality of each one of these, because they have a shape, so each one would be reflecting the light individually. Lastly, on things like this big sphere, we need a secondary reflection down here where we have more of like our mid, like this color should also be down here. Cujo Miniature Painting has a great video on how reflections look on how NMM reflections work on different shapes. That's the right word. And he covers the sphere very carefully, and that's a classic one where you need a strong secondary reflection. But overall, this is good. Like, you've got a nice, super, hyper smooth blend, which I like. Lots of good edges traced. You got some good potential here. We just need to work with some of our volumes a little bit and the color tone. Okay. And as a point of fact here on this one where it's kind of off because it's so yellow, it looks better here because it's more yellow. So, because the light of the room has turned it yellow. All right. Reinhardt, basically, he's asking us about the marble, the shading on the true metallic metal, the lance, and the hair. And he said he's going for a little tabletop plus standard. So, having spent some time with this previously, I'll say that if you're going for tabletop plus, I really think there's only two areas of opportunity I would focus on. Okay, and I'll split those out. If you want to go above that, then here's the rest. The shading on the metal is good. You could go a little farther, taking some individual elements like these feathers and the eagle and stuff like that up on these wings and bringing it up, especially some elements of his armor, where you take, like, you're doing some broad volume shadowing, but you need to tighten that in some more and bring in deeper shadows and higher contrast across the metal. Again, that's if you want to go above tabletop. Our real elements where we can make this pop on the tabletop, first off, is the marble. The marble just doesn't work. We need more thin lines that are moving sort of in a single direction. I've got a couple different videos on marble. You want to keep your lines thinner. They need to be going sort of the same direction. So kind of, something like that where they're all, one's going here, one's going here, one's going like this, one's going down there. So they all kind of are the same, but not like you can't make them all look exactly the same where it'll feel fake. It's a really tough thing because you're trying to nail a fairly organic pattern within a certain band. As well, some white and black lines, some stippling would be good, that kind of stuff. So I would just do, Google some different green marbles and try your best to replicate that with thin white, black, and dark green lines, and then some stippling over top. Hair looks good, like the highlight here and on the tip. I think that's exactly correct. Your other option is really the lance. The lance is kind of boring. It's just not doing anything really interesting, and we could. I would run a much higher transition on this lance. I would bring a light slash across here, like have it go to basically white here and here, and then have this go back to green and have this come down to dark black green. So treat this more like an NMM surface and transition all the way through all that with a nice bright swash cut across the middle. Edge highlight the whole thing in white, and bingo bango, you've got a rockin' lance. So that's my advice, Reinhardt. Overall, cool model. I think he looks good. I think the color composition is fine. You desaturated the red. You could even go a little darker so you don't get too Christmassy. But, I think overall it works fine. Your color scheme is basically red, green, yellow, which is a pretty traditional color scheme. All right, Chris brings us Skin and Moans for his Grimkin. And his main question was on the skin variation. He tried to do two different types of skin that have been sewn together. And he wanted to know, does it work? And my answer is no. So like we see it here on the back where you can see some of this is more red than the others. And that's exactly the problem, Chris. Your painting style, which I love, it's so very you, is so high contrast that a subtle effect like that is going to get lost in the visual confusion. I would go into like an African flesh tone for that other flesh. That's a high enough level of contrast. It'll still track across the miniature. Okay. Secondly, then your other question was on the base. Does the base blend into him? Yes, it does. And you know it does. Here's what I'll say. Oftentimes we know what's wrong with our miniature, right? So Chris came and he said, I'm not sure about the different skin tones, and I feel like the base blends in. If that's in your head, if you're ever having to silence your own inner voice, stop. Listen to that voice. One of the hardest things I've had to do as a competition painter is actually listen to the voice and then do what the voice tells you. Because the voice will say, like, this doesn't look right, this feels wrong. And we go, no, it's fine. It's fine. It's not. Listen to that voice. It knows. You have the artist in you. Okay? I would turn the rock into like something gray with maybe some deep browns or greens or something like that very subtly, and that will create the contrast you want. Overall, he looks fantastic. As usual, your musculature is top-notch. The eyes are great, and the teeth and the smile are creepy. Love it. All right, Sergey basically says he wants to know where his next steps are. Basically he's looking for, he looks at some pro painters and he doesn't trying to figure out what the difference is there. I'll tell you what the difference is. It's in the contrast, man. Contrast and a little bit of composition. So your strongest part on here is your skin because it has a nice high contrast. This is excellent skin. You could go a little brighter up here on the face. You could have a little more highlights. We could work in a little more color like blue into the shadows and stuff like that. But on the whole, it's great. Okay, your skin is fantastic. The rest of the piece does not have that level of interesting visual tonal variation. The red needs to be popped more. The non-metallic gold needs to run a much higher spectrum. I assume you're going for like a cold dead gold, something like Ben Comets does in the Corcus Call video, but it just doesn't have the contrast here. You need more white. You need more of that brown to black transition, and it needs to be much more varied and running across it. Same with the bone. The bone needs to come way, way up and get a lot higher and get a lot brighter in places. That level of contrast is what you need to have happen here across it. Final two notes. That's why your skin and the face of this thing really look the best and pop the most, because they run that full contrast gamut. The final thing I'll say is the fire sword doesn't work. You suddenly at the last moment introduced like bright orange yellow. I understand you have this little red orange tuft right here, but it's so small and weak compared to this, which is so intense. This should probably just be the same blue-black steel as his claw over here and his little head bone pieces, and I think then you'd have a winner. If you relax your eyes and look at this, like where you're not focusing on anything in particular, all you see is the sword, and that's a problem. Finally, with your stone on the bottom, it's boring. It's a gray stone on gray, and you have two different colors of gray that don't match. Make sure your element that came modeled on him matches the basic element you do, and let's get some more different colors mixed in there. You know, this is the Chaos Wastes, so anything goes as far as colors mixed into stone. Hit me with some red, purple, pigment, green, brown, anything. So there you go, Sergey. I hope that helps. Joseph asking about the tattoo, and he said, I'm guessing for the rest of the bust you're going to say more contrast and tonal variation. Again, I like it when people hear me before I talk, and you are exactly correct, Joseph. Exactly correct. So watch the tattoo video. One of the keys is you want to mix some of the purple skin into the tattoo ink, and then you want to do a glaze of the mid-tone purple over top. That will make it look like it's actually sitting under and in the translucent skin layer. Right now, yes, it is too strong. You are exactly correct over the rest of the thing. More tonal variation, more reds or red blues into the shadows, more pinks and stuff near the fresh wounds, more color in the cheeks, under the eyes. You know, I need more. Especially around those open wounds. I'd love to see like bruising or stippling or broken flesh. Just all sorts of color tone and texture is what we need here on this bust. With bust, the key is more. But I'm glad you already knew it before I said it. All right, Olgierd, looking at this Keeper of Secrets. So, asked about the skin. My answer is, you said kind of had trouble pushing the contrast. It still needs to go a lot farther. There's just not enough tonal variation in this skin. It can come up to a higher highlight, and we want to see some like red or blue, or you could cold shadows, warm shadows. I don't really care. that's fine, but we can go a lot farther on the skin as far as contrast goes. And it will still look natural as long as your shadows and contrast is placed naturally. Now, the real challenge we have here is your composition. This is a great shot to show it off. You're using all the colors, and it's too many. When I stop and look at this, my eyes are just, they don't know where to go. You've got bright green claws, bright yellow clothes, bright pink pillows. All of your bright stuff is drawn to the bottom of the model. I'm literally just sitting here staring at her lower legs because the pink is so overwhelming and the yellow is so overwhelming. My recommendation to you, Olgierd, is go look at any of your online color wheels. Pick a triadic or quadratic scheme that makes sense. Most of them have, most of these color wheels have the ability to select the type of thing you want, and then you can find your appropriate colors. If this was me, I would cut out, like, you could use the green, purple, blue. That would be valid. That's actually not a triadic or quadratic, but that's there's a harmonized scheme where you're picking only from one side of the wheel. Its formal name escapes me at the moment, but you can do that. I don't remember. Anyways, there's a thing where you do 3 colors in a row. You could do that. That would be fine. Or you could go yellow, or sorry, not yellow. You could go like purple, blue, and pink. That would work. But again, we need to distribute these more evenly. So when we use bright saturated colors like this green, this yellow, this pink, they need to be evenly dispersed around the model. I would need like some of the pink up here in her hair. Maybe the feathers were also pink. That would go a long way. Maybe there are elements up here. Maybe her claws also go like, purple to pink. Like, just there's stuff that we could do. Maybe her hair has pink highlights in it. There's stuff we could do to like bring it up here. But right now we just have too many different colors. On the true metallic metal element, I think you're in a good place. That's your strongest part. You need to go a little farther. Keep pushing your shadows, especially your secondary reflections. So keep working that and push the highlights up to higher. You may also want to think about things like interference colors, where you're pushing in a slight glaze of a colored ink in there where it's reflecting what's around it. So this could be some light blue into steel. Always is a good play. So that's my advice for you. Definitely go farther on the skin tone, and you can do that by both highlighting up a little more as well as working in some like red or blue shadows. Also, we need to cut some colors here. If we're not going to cut anything, then we need to figure out ways to evenly balance it. Everything has to be a triangle. Is the simplest way to think about it. That's not always true. That is a rule that can be broken, but it has to be broken in very careful ways. So just stick to the triangle thing is generally my advice. You'll go very far just sticking to the triangle rule, where there are always 3 evenly balanced and distributed points of color across the miniature in a rough triangle. All right, hope that helps. All right, next up, Tim Heinzman wants to know about color composition and the blending. Try to improve on those aspects the most. Sure. Color composition-wise, I think it's fine. I think your blending is strong. Yeah, I mean, like, I think on the areas you focused on, you were very successful. I actually really find this blue, red-purple scheme very interesting. It's super unique. I've never seen anything like it. I think it's kind of cool. I would say it would be stronger if you inverted the color composition on the Juggernaut. So, like, right now you have the blue demon on top of the blue steel and then the red on the sides and the bottom. If the red was where your blue was on the Juggernaut and your blue was where the red was, it would be a lot stronger because you would then be alternating the color scheme, right? Because, like, the Rider gets kind of lost against the blue. As a side note, I think just sort of some other areas for improvement, your gold, we need to take that contrast way, way up. It's very flat and boring right now. It's just gold. It needs a lot more. I would also look at integrating some darker spots. You have a very bright, light color scheme. Having darker shades on your gold, running some areas to darker black, especially on this like blue steel that you've got, I think would be very beneficial. Same with the true metallic metal, like these weapons sticking out of the ice. They need to go, like, we need shading here. The metals don't do the rest of your model justice. You have such great transitions in your sort of ice blue and your red purple. And then the gold and the steel are just flat. So, there you go. Overall, really creative scheme. Like, I actually super dig this scheme. It's very cool. Very unusual. All right, Thomas with his ever-chosen entry. I saw this one online. This is super cool. So let's take a look. Yeah, so, you know, he wanted to know about, like, composition and the contrast. Did he go far enough? I think for the most part, yes. I love the extra texture added on the wings. I think that looks really good. The shield looks really good. The weapon looks really good. Here's, like, this is great work. Let's start there. Now, if we wanted to go farther, where do I see opportunities? A little bit of deeper shading on some of the branch areas, taking more of that deep dark green into it, maybe green-brown. There's some areas here that are very hidden away in shadow you could use to create some stronger contrast. A little bit of highlight opportunities, especially a little more toward the tip of the wings, bringing them up, but as well as highlights on the top of the purple here to kind of really make those pop out. Same if we go over here and look at this picture. Same on these little wing things. I don't know what they're called. Same there. Same, you could pop up a little bit brighter highlights, like go up to an almost white on the edge of the wood or something here and here, here. Just a couple little, like, create those points of very high light where it's really catching. So you could push your contrast just a little bit farther. Lastly, on the weapon, which I really like, his halberd or whatever he has here, whatever this spear thing he's got. Think about an interference color, maybe working in a little very light blue glaze. I talked about interference colors earlier. We'll see it again later on a sword, but maybe like a little bit of blue here in this high mid, just very, very light, a filter. You know, so it's so weak, but it just suddenly creates a little bit of distinction between its purple and the purple anywhere else on the miniature. But overall, this is great. I think you won your store entry, so congratulations. And by the way, the plinth looks freaking awesome. Love it. Your freehand there is just great and just gorgeous. So very well done. Okay. All right, Matt O'Brien. He's doing a couple levels of detail with miniatures. So we have sort of a let's call it basic, medium, and try-hard. And the first miniatures we look at here are our basics. My biggest advice is actually the same on all of these, and it's a little more tonal variation where you can get it quick. On the basic goblins, which you're trying to just get out fast, like lots of them, a little bit deeper on the skin, glaze in like some subtle red tones or deeper greens on the sides, you know, something like that. Just a quick hit around their skin could go a long way because they're very bright, and we could just use a little more color there. But I understand these are meant to be fast, so leave the cloth how it is. It's cool. Okay, we go up to medium, and same thing holds true on the skin. I'd also like to see a little more variation now on the cloak, since that's the biggest part of the miniature. Going out to a little more gray, maybe a couple hashes and scratches here and there on the end where the cloth is frayed. Things like that will go a long way. If we went all the way up to high for like your centerpiece, then the name of the game is just tonal variation and contrast, right? So like if I were talking about going up and doing like the Arachnarok spider or some other big, you know, some other centerpiece model, like a loon boss on Mangler, I would want to see a lot more variation in the skin, the deeper greens going out to the higher highs, pinks in the nose. I'd want to see a lot more variation on the mushroom hat and like little different elements of color in there. I'd want to see the individual things like here on the straps have nice dark lines and light edges, you know, all that kind of stuff. It's just tonal variation. Okay. All right. Greg, back for July. This time he's got his Skull Taker. Again, ever chosen. This is a great option because I want to show everybody a picture that Greg took that everybody should do. And it's this. This shows Greg does not have enough tonal variation in the picture. Enough contrast. I want everybody to look at the sword. Let's look at the sword in color. It runs black to this bright yellow. There's a lot going on. Now let's look at how the sword looks in black and white. Boom. See how that variation happens? Now look at his face and the skulls and the cloth and here. See how this is basically all the same gray? That's what we need. You need to increase your contrast. More on the horns, more on the face. This should be the brightest spot of the miniature. We should have deep shadows here. We should use this opportunity around the sides of the skulls, stuff like that to really increase it. Same with the skulls on his back. They're quite flat. Adding in more deep brown black tones there to really get those kicking. That's the kind of thing you want to do. Okay? So, make sure you're going that direction. All right. A lot more contrast. One other final note is when you're doing the, hold on, let's go back to this picture. When you're doing the yellow to this sort of like 90s sword thing, it's cute, but bring the yellow to the bottom. Make the black at the top. The problem is that you're literally leading the eye off of the miniature. You're saying, don't look at this. My eye goes whoop right up to here because this is right, because your eye naturally moves from darkest to lightest spots. So make sure you're going from, like, if you invert this and have the tip be dark and this be yellow, like a heat center, you would draw the eye down. If the center of his face was the brightest, boom, you're right on point where you want to be. Okay? All right. Next up, we've got Nick Triano, and we're going to talk about his Caradron Overlords. All right, so let's talk about some Endrin riggers. Okay, so my general feedback to you here, Nick, is going to be the silver integrated into the blue. I think works fine. I think you have kind of a metal to the blue, so you're getting sort of free shine and contrast there. What we need is more tonal variation on the browns, the beards, the flesh, all that stuff. It's quite flat right now, so I'd like to see more highlights here on the top of the mustache, more distressment to the leather, things like that. Like, that's really your area and opportunity for improvement here, is kicking this stuff up. Also, with the yellow, as you're mixing white in, I think you want to make sure you smooth that out. Make sure that's a smooth transition out from the sort of yellow-white. Right now, they kind of have this very hard line in there. So just kind of expanding the tonal variation across and brightening up the center of the face, top of the hat, the beard. Draw the attention here. Right now, your brightest spots are not the face, where the center of the model where I want to be looking. So that's my best advice. Okay, James Denny with his Everchosen. Yes, Arcanonus. Oh, I know this fig well. So I mentioned earlier, we're going to go over to this picture. I mentioned earlier interference colors, which is great here. James is using the interference color of orange in a otherwise, yellow-white sword. You may want to expand the volume of light out, by the way, just a tad. But overall, I like what you're doing here. The color transitions look great. As well, on her armor, let's go back to this picture. I do like the method. I think that looks good. I think your highlights are all placed well. Between her armor and the hair, I think I'd like to see a little bit more of an interference color like you did on the sword. So something like some blue light. We're going to see black armor later that has this. And that's what's really missing here, is that extra color here where I fade out through an environmental reflection. Your red is also a little flat. It could use some more tonal variation. So make sure you have the appropriate highlights and shadows there. And then finally, on your hazard stripes on the gun, it's one of my favorite pieces of art, and John Blanche put hazard stripes on a very stubby bolt pistol. The challenge is, of course, replicating that. I myself have had to do this a couple times, and boy, is it annoying. But you just want to make sure you really sharpen those up and get those as absolutely precise as you can. Some flow improver and ink is your friend there, but I very much like the transition you did. I think that looks great. So overall, she looks really cool. I dig her. Careful of floating foot syndrome down here. Make sure if you have this kind of space where her foot isn't resting properly, you then go back in with a little putty or something and just kind of underneath the foot and then paint it to match very quickly the rest of the base. I don't have a tutorial on that yet, but I will have one coming sometime. Texture on the robe looks really good. I think she's overall very strong. What I do love, and I want to draw everybody's attention to, is the face and the variation on the face. The contrast there is wonderful. If I took this into black and white, we would see this very strong shadow on the sides of her face. You've really captured that well and really popped out the highlight in the center of the face wonderfully. So that looks great. All right, next up, Martin Orlando. How can he take his painting style to the next level? Okay. He also has questions about presentation. So, much like Drake, Martin, we're going to start from the bottom, and now we're here, okay? So, step 1, base plinth. Always should be painted black. Just always black. There are reasons to use other color plinths. There are people who do it. There are generally good reasons for it. Just stick with black with something like this. It has to work in a very reasonable fashion. You have to be trying to communicate something through a natural wood grain. Next up, into the dirt. The dirt is boring. It's just dry brushed brown. kick that up. I could say the same for the gray, for the skulls, for all of that. It's just flat, right? Like you painted the wall, but you didn't do anything with it. This has no interest in it. The bones are all fairly flat. Like, this is not visually interesting. You added nothing to your figure through the background and the vase. In fact, you detracted from it because this doesn't have the same level of visual interest, color, style, and artistic interpretation as the miniature. It's a tough lesson, one I learned myself very hard early on. Like, if you're going to add elements, everything you add has to be taken to the absolute level. Okay? Let's talk about the miniature itself. If you're going to do a socket, make sure the socket fits exactly. You can't do a weak socket like that with a bunch of space around. It needs to, like, match and just fit right in. It's super annoying. That's why I hate sockets. On to the miniature. With this silky cloak, he's got this sort of silky sheen cloak. It needs to pop higher. And I would go into, set me a color temperature. I need a yellow white light or a blue white light being the highest highlights here, where it's showing me what environmental color is this satin cloak actually reflecting. I also like more directionality to the light would be really good. So again, with the hair, and you know, we have these very even highlights all throughout, but like what direction is the light actually coming from other than generically above, right? So creating a crown on the hair, more variation in the hair tone would be really good. A little more color in the face would also be great. In general, with faces, you want to think the top is yellow, the middle is red, and the bottom is blue. So having very slight references to those color filters in there is generally positive. As to the sword's the area where we've got our biggest improvement. Right now, it's just it's just not doing anything. I suspect you were going for like an elf magic sword, you know, Sting or something. It just doesn't have the interest. Darren Latham just put up a big 3-part series on swords and doing power swords and glazing with swords. Well, look at that. Look how he does them, where he'll alternate and go like 3 highlight spots and 2 highlight spots. He'll push them toward the middle. In general, when your highlight spots are in the middle and you're not just running the 1-to-1, it's going to look a lot better. If it was just tabletop stuff, I would say you're perfectly fine. No issue. But if you're going for competition, we've just got to make this more visually interesting. So, ultimately, what I would say is we need to go from just like, if you're really interested in competition painting and taking your style up to the next level, you need to go from just painting the miniature well to creating something for me that's visually interesting, right? You have to go from just painting it, like nailing the techniques is just the first step. A lot of people think of competition painting as just being very good at techniques. That's actually an extremely minimal part of it. Like, you have to, but that's just the barrier of entry, right? Then you've got to do something artistic with it. You've got to show me something. You've got to let me discover something as I get closer to the miniature and begin to look at it. And doing things like setting the temperature of your lighting, and having more interest in the individual elements of that, the direction of the lighting, those are the things that are going to draw me in and take you up to the next level. Okay. Sergey wanted to draw the art on the box with the pattern. Tried something new with the weapon and the magazines and a bit of texture on his beret. So things I really like. I like the shirt. I like the magazine and the metal with the blue reflective steel. I think that actually works really well. The beret texture looks great. So yeah, that was a fantastic choice. Well done. Some just quick elements that I think you have room for improvement. The design looks good on the shoulder, but the problem is your red paint you put down, you didn't put down a neutral color first. And so as a result, what's happened is we just have, I can see where the red is a different color between the green and where it goes over the white. So my advice is you start by laying down like a brown here, and then you paint the red over the top. So a thin brown line to reset everything to a neutral tone, then lay your red over the top. Simultaneously, the leather needs to be more distressed in a more interesting way. You have some variation, but it's not in any sort of way I understand. Like, pull some more light towards the edges and things like that, especially these top edges. A little more variation in that, and in things like the shirt, where it's a white shirt, but it can have some gray colors in it, or something like that. I think that's where you want to be. Okay? So, overall, cool stuff. I like the green. I think that looks really strong. The beret texture looks really strong. So overall, I dig it very much. It's a really cool take on him. All right, so let's continue. Next up, we have Tobias, who has a little speed painting experiment with just white and inks, which I want to say I freaking love this model. So this is, again, a speed paint. He used basically inks and white paint, and I think it came out absolutely fantastic. I love this. This is a great example of what you can achieve with inks over and a speed painting. And ghosts are so good for it. I love this color scheme. I love how you've popped out and kept white in the right spots. The weapon, all that looks good. I agree with you that your opportunity here is probably in the tendrils of the lower part of the spirit himself. We could take this out to a more purple-white. You could even mix in a little bit of green-white here on the end. I understand you don't want to go back to full green, but just a little bit of that kind of spooky transition out toward the bottom there, I think is your big opportunity. Other than that, I think this guy is just aces. And like an army that looks like this would just blow people away. So I think this is really great work and probably very fast to achieve, which is just a win-win-win. So really great work, Tobias. Okay. Next up, we have Stefan, who has some questions about the NMM and the face of the miniature. And yes, Stefan, I agree with you. The face kind of disappears. So I'm going to tell you how we get back at that. Let's tackle this color first. That it wasn't really meant to be NMM and just kind of coming off that way. But it doesn't have the full contrast, so then it just kind of looks strange. My answer is let's glaze in some purples and greens very subtly into here. Make it feel more pearlescent by those green and purple glazes rather than NMM, and I think you'll have something visually interesting. Now, next up, his face is sadly mostly hidden. So the answer is we use what's around it to draw the interest to the face. So we have this little hair shock back here. Let's put a highlight right here on the hair. We have this brocade crenellation on the edge of the helm. Let's pop that way, way, way up to like near white. We have these reflective scales. Let's create some highlights here on the scales and here on the scales and pop those way up. All of a sudden then we've got bright here on lines pointing down. We got a bright spot here on hair coming in from the side. We got scales, and then finally as we tighten in, we go to near white on this crenellation, and bing, bang, boom, we're looking at the face of the miniature. I would also say you may want to think about some light turquoise into the sea ocean, as well as popping out some of the little inter drips and waves a little stronger. That kind of feels a little too samey back here, so a little bit more of that kind of even just dry brushing and some light glazing of that turquoise color could really help you. But overall, this is a great piece. I love your sea creatures. The base looks very nice, and I think it sells. Okay, next up, Fulcrum brings us Sabine. And I actually want to start at the back here to talk about color composition. So Sabine has such a fascinating thing because she's this mix of bright popping colors with these very dull green fatigues. Earlier when I talked about color triangles, Sabine is a great example of it. Orange, 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 boom, 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 right around the model. Yellow, 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 right, even yellow. So little triangle there. Like, the artist who put Sabine together really had a good concept of how to make something look crazy and pattern, and like she's just a wild, rebel, hence the name, I suppose. But at the same time, they still kept the color balance very sharp. So now let's look at how Fulcrum executed on this, and I think it's really great. This is such good execution of the freehand, of the patterning, of everything. I think it's really wonderful. Especially because some of the like detail on this miniature is a little softer than I would otherwise like, but I think this is great. So I think your biggest opportunity is probably with a little more variation in the pants, bringing in a little bit of maybe like sepia shadows or something like that here, as well as a little bit of harder edges and dark lines and separations in the leather. Like actually putting in some real dark lines and white lines on the edge of the leather, maybe a little bit of distressed texture, that kind of thing. Finally, on the Darksaber, Darksabers are tough. They're a really weird thing to paint. Rusto does some painting on this, Rusto. He does a lot of, I think he's done a lot of lightsabers. So you can look up his take on lightsabers. He's really good at them. I think he often has a light spot in the middle, so it's not only going sort of vertically, but horizontally as well. You may want to look into something like that and have like a small volume transition highlight here in the middle of the saber to kind of communicate that it is full of energy. Take a look at how he does it and see if you like it. But overall, this is just really great work. I think you've super captured Sabine here in a really wonderful way. So, top notch, man. I dig it. As usual, you're killing it with the Star Wars stuff. All right, Evan Clayson. And basically he's wanting to look at the OSL and having this sort of green glow. So the first thing I'll say, Evan, is we got to talk about depth of focus, man. Like, just put the figures in there one at a time and on the same or on the same plane, because it makes it very hard to look at the pictures when half of the models are severely out of focus. Okay? Like, it hurts my eyes. So please don't do this again. Now, do you capture the green light? Yes, I think you do. Absolutely. I think like it's actually a quite good interpretation of the green glazes and those things glowing. Feels about right on the level of brightness. Where we're missing is the opposite. Striking the match creates a shadow. So I need darker colors back here in the back on the opposite side. You know, these areas down here, where there's no light, this should be super shadowed. Worked in with like deep, like a black leather color, a deep purple black kind of shadow here on the back side. These should have much deeper shadows. That's how you sell it. Go look at like Roman Lapat does a lot of work on this on Massive Voodoo. If you look at his busts, he has a couple busts like of a guy being burned at the stake, where he plays with this sort of extreme lighting in darkness. That's the kind of, and look at how much shadow he uses, how little of the miniature is actually lit. My final note for you, Evan, is the tails they don't work. We got to get rid of these tails. The key to nighttime painting is the moon, red is gray and yellow white, right? Like the moon and the nighttime light desaturates color. And so yet you have this like, bam, intense pink. It is the brightest thing on the miniature. It overwhelms the green. Those tails need to be a very subtle like flesh tone with a hint of crimson in them, very desaturated, deep shadows on the underside, away from the green, that kind of stuff. Those are the weakest element of the whole thing, and they're what's destroying your illusion, because you have this great bright light being cast, and then all of a sudden it's just like super pink back there in the back. So those tails need to be a much softer, like in general, rat tails shouldn't be tentacle pink. They should be like a soft flesh tone with maybe a little bit of crimson added to just subtly push into that pink tone. And here you want to weaken that out even further. Speaking as someone who has painted probably 500 or 600 of these, as I have almost 10,000 points of Skaven. I've done a lot of Skaven tails. I feel confident that if you go to, you want to weaken that way out. Okay. Next up, Dwight. So Dwight has some questions about color placement and how to carry the triangles. So we're going to look at this image. So Dwight, first off, you triggered me, buddy, right away. I can't handle blonde hair that's actually yellow. Blonde hair isn't yellow. Go watch my tutorial on how to paint blonde hair. We do not use sun yellow in it. We might use a little ochre here and there as a highlight, but blonde is not yellow. Now, on this variation in the skin tone, I actually think you did a good job with the guy. I think you could go farther on her. But the main problem here is that you use the same skin tone for both she and him. Right? They should be different in skin tone to separate the two figures. Secondly, you have a huge glossy effect over the whole miniature. We need to matte that out. Way too much gloss. We don't want that kind of glossiness. It destroys your otherwise high. If you're going to go and do highlighting, it needs to be flat. Secondly, as far as balancing the colors, well, let's talk about it. Let's assume the yellow isn't there anymore. You got purple here, you got purple here. That's good. So 2 spots. All right, how about this horn here is purple? Or this horn down the back of her head goes into a purple tone. Boom, boom, boom. Now we got a triangle. Let's talk about blue. We can when we're trying to balance bright colors, we can either desaturate them. So let's take this into white. Go look at the one that I painted. You'll notice I have this horn being blue infused as well, but it's mostly white. So it's a very weak blue. So we can weaken the color. Or we could weaken it a little. We got blue. How about this thing down here? This could be blue. Why not? Who knows what color his little tabard is here, right? Or the strings. Make the strings a color. Again, like, the key is don't just look at the miniature and say, this thing is this, so hence I have to paint it this color. It's this material, hence it has to be this color. You can go any direction you want with this stuff and take that artistic license to balance the colors. So, you know, if you had maybe a little bit of blue where she's striking it, maybe they're just going blue where she's touching the strings as she's creating magical energy. And maybe this is blue, and then all of a sudden, bam, we're fully color balanced across the miniature. So my best advice would be a little more variation on her skin and push her skin into like a gray-white tone. And I think that that will create the separation you need. But this direction you're going is good. Let's just get it matted out. Overall, it's nice. You're definitely going the right direction. We just need to keep pushing. All right, so let's keep going. So next up, we have Paso, who brings us his Shaggoth conversion. And he's looking for general comment in areas of general improvement, as well as specifically on the non-metallic gold. Sure. So let's say, in general, tonal variation. Skin, horns, hair, shaft of the weapon, fur, all of it. It's too flat. So, you know, see the video that I have that I mentioned at the beginning, but like top of each muscle, drawing the horns down into that, popping out more of the center of the face, all that kind of thing. You could also, you know, instead of just these being dark, they could be lit in some way or be a different color to be visually interesting. Thin lines on the shaft. The fur could have transitions like a black area in the center of fur going out to gray-white fur, then brown around the edges. The mohawk could have a dark center, you know, it could be very dark near the bottom and then get to very light at the tip. That's traditionally how you do it. So speaking of the non-metallic gold, let's go ahead and go to a picture that really shows that. Yes, it is off, but you've picked like the most complicated shape to do it on. This like lion face is really like one of the most impossible things to sell the non-metallic effect on because it's just so unbelievably complicated. So instead, I just want to talk about it from this angle right here. This is where you're the best. And the reason for that is because here you have more of your mid and mid-high tones. So this is the yellow ochre. Whereas up here, you have so much white and so much of it is faded out, it just doesn't sell, right? And part of that is just the challenge of all these lines. What you want to do there is create a lot of areas of mid-high and then go to white lines, sort of reflection points that are moving across and light catches. It's a very complicated surface. It would not be my first, like, that would not be my first surface to try non-metallic gold on. Start on some more like straightforward sort of like Stormcast chest plates and stuff like that would be my recommendation. You know, something that where the shapes are more definable. But here, this is a good example. So here, this is nice. I like how you're cutting in with the light. The trick is you need to not use these lines for white. I understand why people do this, but it's not correct. There are ways to use lines in this reflection, but it's not like this. This should just be a white that fades out into a white-yellow into the yellow ochre, right? And if you did that instead, if they had more of a hash look to them as they were faded out, this would suddenly look 10 times better. But this is the right idea. Like where you're shadowing, where your shading's placed, you have multiple light points catching. This is solid. The rest of this is just a very complicated shape to do it on. So you've got the right tones, but you need more mid-high throughout. So more yellow ochre and yellow ochre white. Okay. Casper bringing us, again, non-metallic for the first time. A lot of people trying non-metallic and want feedback. Okay. So, as well as general sort of feedback on the model. The non-metallic needs more, again, mid-high. So, like, you're more of this green-white going up a little bit here would do you well to sell this effect. Over here on the gold parts, it would do well to have, again, a little more yellowness to it. Same thing. You know, here, 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 that kind of stuff. In addition, secondary reflections on these circle cones where light has bounced back up and reflected. It's a strange model because you've told me, like, it's a bunch of fire, so theoretically this should be casting light. Like, in your lighting scheme, this fire is making 0 light, which is always going to be tough. So maybe her hair is just fire colored. I don't know. But right now, it's not doing anything. It's not actually making any light. Maybe that's okay, maybe it's not, but it is what it is. The one thing I would say that's odd is I don't like this black hidden down here in the base of fire. The base of fire is white and white-yellow. So we should, ideally, you want a nice dark line here around the edge of her face, but it shouldn't be anything beyond the edge of her head. All of this should be replaced with like white-yellow, and then you want to go more into like an orange tone throughout a lot of this, and then up into a slightly deeper whole red, brown, black at the end. The skin variation is nice. You could glaze in some deeper purples or something like that to create more interesting color transitions rather than just the blue. But on the whole, I do like the skin looks good, and you've picked out some nice highlights, and they look quite smooth. So that's solid. But that's my general thoughts there. Hope that helps out. All right, Jeff, talking about or wants to some general feedback on his Vermin Lord. So, Vermin Lord, thing I really love, the horns look really good, the skin looks really good. The sick, mottled, bloated, like this rotting skin, the bruising, the damage, the coloration on it, excellent, excellent work. Now, you want to go up a notch? Okay. So, the hair is our biggest area. One, it's still kind of satiny. We need to get rid of that. It shouldn't have that sheen to it. Two, it's still too much, like, just completely highlighted as though it's a singular volume. It's not. It's lots of little hairs. So you got to get in there with a sharp brush, and you got to start picking out individual hairs and making sharp, 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 thin lines over and over and over again, all throughout the thing. And picking out some different highlights and stuff like that, burying some deeper shadows down in here, getting this darker in thin lines. Like, hair is a matter of painting repeated thin lines. You take a sharp brush, like a size 1 sharp brush, and you start doing some very thin lines. And you do that for a couple hours, at least. Unfortunately, that's just the nature of hair, if you want to take it up to the next level. And the reason you don't dry brush it or something like that is because you just don't have the control. You can do a little bit of that to start and then refine with a sharp brush. That's fine. But in general, that's where you want it. You're going to end up at. My other note here is 2 quick things with the tail. I'd like to see a little more highlights on the top of the tail. So that means, again, coming in with a sharp, thin brush and going tick, 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 tick along the top. And then on the weapons, the Plague Reapers, the Escorpina green, this light color green, feels a bit off. It's too bright, too the same color as the hair. It doesn't really feel like a poisoned weapon or like a magic poisoned weapon or something, which is what I think you're going for. I feel like if this was a deeper green, you'd be a little better off. Like if we cut out some of that yellow and smoothed some of that deeper green into that. So it just looked like it was sort of dripping with a poison over the metal. I feel like that would be a better way to go there. So that's my thoughts on that one. Hope that helps. Okay. Next up, Sebastian. So his Ever-Chosen entry. All right, so I like your colors. I think that's really well placed. I think the Imperial Fist banner on the ground looks really nice. See the free hand there. That looks good. If we come back to one of these images here. Here we go. This is going to show us what I think we need to work on. So the gold, the non-metallic gold is where we're really falling down. Again, see all the other comments I've made. This needs a little more highlight, a little more mid-high to high lights. The shoulder's probably the better part here, but a lot of it's kind of rough. It needs to be like smoothed out. There's some points in the transitions where it's not quite as smooth as we would want. So a little more, and probably a little more yellow-white tone mixed in there just in general. Like these shoulder edges look good. The backpack is where you're really falling down, and that's a shame because it's the part that's very visible. So I think basically popping up those highlights, making sure we catch every edge, adding some light catches. Again, go look at Raza's blog, at Darren Latham's blog. He has a big article about gold. You see the difference that the light catches make. He walks you through it and how to place them. That would be my advice there. The pink and purple and all of that looks good. You want to make sure you're really separating all these elements. So some of these don't have as dark a line as we might like between them. Some very careful black lining could really help and make a big difference. As well, you may want to think about taking the pink shading down a little to really get into, like, take some more purple shadows and make that have a little greater transition. But overall, I think the color scheme works. It's very, it's very clear what this reads. So I think that's fine. It's well balanced. Your blue is balanced around the model. The pink is balanced. All that seems fine. Lastly, on the base, the stone is very boring. You've once again created just gray stone. So this is the most common thing I harp on. Nature is nature. It is not simply gray. It's not in grayscale. There should be, lots of different colors of purple or red or green or brown down here. If you don't want to clash with your fig up here, Secret Weapon makes a color of pigment called violet that is a great rust color that's great to use on rock. You could use some of that. You could mix a little blue tones into the rock. I do that all the time. I think it looks really well with this, or it looks really good with Slaanesh. So think about stuff like that. Okay. Next up, all right, Alex Fry reposted. So basically what he's saying is he wanted to do this all-in loaded brush for his ever-chosen entry, and second project have full non-metallic metal. Okay, so how do we improve this? So let's take a look. The first thing I'll say, Alex, is you're going exactly the right direction when you're trying to do non-metallic across, or sorry, when you're trying to do like loaded brush. You said, I want to learn this. I want to get good at this. I'm going to do it on every surface. Awesome. That's a good way to go. Just don't stop there. Loaded brush is a perfectly fine technique. Ben Comets uses it a lot. Ben Comets doesn't stop with that. He's going to go back and he's going to wet blend some. He's going to glaze over the top. He's going to adjust. He's going to use 18 different techniques in an area sometimes to get to the blend he wants if he's having trouble with it. Sometimes he'll nail it on the first one and done. Sometimes he'll go back and work with it a whole bunch. Because when you're trying to blend for competition or something like that, there is no stopping. You throw the kitchen sink at it, okay? So working individual techniques like that and forcing yourself to do it, that's really good. But you still want to go all the way. I think your main challenge, Alex, is really in just sort of paint cleanliness. So if we come over here and kind of look at some of these images, you'll see what I mean. So this is a good one. You see how the red is going up onto the back of the collar of the dog. You see how the bone color here is coming off onto the shoulder. The gold is uneven where it's placed on the cloak. Just all sorts of little touches like that make the figure seem messy. We want every element to be very sharp, very crisp, very separated, right? That's like ultimately one of the things that's going to separate a good, competition model from one that's not, is you have very clear delineations, light, dark, light, dark, light, dark, across the model with very clear definitions between them, okay? So just making sure that all your paint jobs are nice and cleanly executed, I think, is a big one for you. The other thing I would say is right now, there's nothing drawing my attention to the center of the face. So to this area right here, we'd want to pop the highlight up on that higher. Like in general, your non-metallic gold, I think you want to go farther. More highlights, more lowlights. Like it doesn't feel like it has enough tonal variation to really capture everything you need. So that would be my biggest advice. Finally, this green around the eyes, that's we don't want to do that. You don't want to take a single bright color like that and just place it somewhere. It draws all the attention to the wrong place. If you want to do a glowing eye thing, which you don't really need, but if you want to do that, then make it in line with the rest of your color, so like red or something like that, right? And that would be the way to go. Like fiery eyes would work okay with the rest of this because you have a lot of red and yellow in the scheme. So that's sort of my advice there. Okay. All right, next up, Chris. This is his ever-chosen entry. By the way, so many ever-chosen entries this month. So many. He's looking for feedback on the shiny non-metallic metal silver and gold, as well as the OSL and the overall composition. People ask a lot of questions. All right. So I want to get over here to this picture because this is really going to sum up everything I think about this. I think this is a really cool piece. It's fascinating to me because it's too busy. This is not a common. This is not an issue I usually run up against. The issue here is that we've got too many different colors transitioning too quickly over the whole thing and not enough places for the eye to rest. I love the effect you're getting on the steel. I would probably smooth some of it out. Like if I look at some of the other images, I understand you're going for like these lines and stuff, but I think some of it might be you might want to make it a little smoother. Like there's just some transitions that are a little weird, a little harsh. It's not clear that anything's really OSL. I assume you're going for the fire. The problem is there's so much other riot of color, it's not immediately evident that that's OSL. Like, I'm sure it looked right to you because you knew what you were doing. But, like, if I go look at this picture, let's go back here. It's not really evident that these are glowing and casting color. A little bit, I guess, right here, maybe. Maybe on the stone. But it's kind of hard to tell because it's still very similar to, like, what's up here on the top of this. And no part of this pointing upwards is reflecting anything down here, right? So is this the color of the steel, or is this what is this reflecting, right? I I assume like this is meant to be reflecting her skin or something like that. I'm not sure. Whereas this purple is meant to be reflecting him. The challenge here is it's just too busy. So my recommendation is more of this needs to be more neutral. Honestly, I think her skin is a problem in that it looks the same as the steel. I think his skin is probably okay, but like you did so much great freehand on here, like I kind of zoomed past it. Yeah, there it is. It's really cool. It gets completely lost. I looked at this for 10 minutes before I noticed the freehand because there's so much else going on, right? You've got to give a viewer's, like, you've got to direct the viewer's eye in some way, and you've got so many dense transitions happening everywhere that it's kind of hard for me to actually tell what's happening. Like, you've got reflective steel, and she's crazy colored, and he's crazy colored, and the axe is crazy colored, and there's fire down at the bottom, and right? And as I look at it, I don't know where to go. So it's one of those rare occasions where, like, you did everything really well. Like, I think the reflections are cool. I think the gold is good. I think the freehand is good. Like, it's an insane thing to say. You did too much good stuff. Like, and it might be different in person. Maybe if I had it in my hand, it would be different. But, like, looking at it on here, there's just too much for me to interpret. If it was me, I would probably knock her skin down to a color. Like I would knock her skin down to a neutral color. Keep kind of the reflective steel thing going on. That's cool. Maybe take his skin back a little bit. You know, maybe just go for like the reflective steel. The super reflective, crazy, non-metallic chrome steel reflecting green and purple everywhere is probably fine by itself. I don't know that you also needed all the other elements. The axe looks really great. I will say that. I think that's a wonderful execution on that. Let's see if we can get to a picture of the axe. That's really good. Yeah, that's a good one. Like, I like all those colors. I like how you're catching the light pollution in there. Like, that's the kind of thing that looks really good. There you go. That's nice. I really like how you caught all those in there. I think that looks great. I wish I could, I wish I would have found that more easily, is what I would say, right? So if you're going to do crazy stuff with like the OSL and the glow and the steel, then the rest of the model needs to be calm so that it's framed by craziness with a calm eye in the middle. So that's my advice. Overall, she's really cool. I like the team. I just think we need to neutralize out some of it. All right, Paul. So basically experimented using some Chimera colors and to get the water reflection on the bottom. I think the water reflection works. The oxidation works. I think the skin cracks look really nice. The areas for improvement I'd give you are the texture on the his like handkerchief here, whatever this thing is, his neckerchief. There you go. Looks a little weak compared to the wonderful texture you did on like the coat and the vest coat here underneath. I think those all look really great, and the oxidation and the rust. The rust on the sword could have a little more variance. It's rather even in all of its spots. I'd like to see a little more tone changes of some deeper brown and some brighter orange and stippled in differently. I think the hilt looks a lot better than the sword itself. That's sort of my general feeling. A little more under highlighting on the cracks. Looks like you got some. Hard for me to tell if there's enough there, like highlighting the bottom of the crack. Maybe you did, and it's just the lighting in the picture's not catching it. So if that looks, if the underlight on the light catch on the bottom of the crack looks stronger in real life, you can ignore that. I think my biggest thing is I'd love to see a little more blue in the reflection of the lower part of his face here. You've got some. I like hiding that in some of the shadows. I'd like to see it a little more up here in his eye, extending out into the low mid-tones a little more. I think that would really sell it. Finally, here on his like badges, all three of these are weathered almost identically. It feels like some good hashing or scratching in from the sides and things like that in different kinds of patterns would really sell the effect. So that's kind of my thought there. But overall, really cool bust. I think you did a great job with it. All right, Seth Page. Slowing down and focusing more on technique. These are 2 hours apiece. So I'll give you feedback as though it's speed painting. And I agree with you. I mean, I think what you need to do is go back. Like, they still look very dirty, as though they were just washed with like a too dark color over the white and weren't cleaned up. And that would be my main thing. Let's have more cleanliness to things like the white. And if you say, well, they're supposed to be dirty, they're walking around, they're kind of dirty people, like, because they're sort of special forces people in the mud, that's fine. That's not how dirt gathers, right? Dirt doesn't gather like a wash into recesses. Like, it stains, and it's like there's a patterning to how dirt would happen in nature, and it's not this. So, like, if you're going to do that kind of thing, you got to clean them back up and then apply the weathering intentionally, right? So that's kind of my thought there. Taking them into that next clean phase, I think is fine. But if you're going for speed painting, I think they're very good. I think their faces and skin look really nice. So I think that's well done. Okay. All right. Okay. Let's keep going. All right. Next up, Radislav. First painted mini in a long time. First experience with contrast. Not sure if the whole piece is too dark or has enough contrast. So let's take a look at this guy. Here we go. My answer is I think you've gotten enough contrast in most places. I do think you need some more tonal variation. So, like, the Griffhounds need a little more contrast. Maybe, like, his fur up here. But, like, his coat, the gold, the pants, I think those look good. The metal probably is a little flat. The biggest problem is you don't have enough tonal variation in, like, the stone, the steel, the gold, the background. This gold is okay. But this gray background and steel here in the stone is just straight up boring. Their toes are also a little blank. I could see more there. The steel. What looks really good is, like, his face is really nice. And like I said, like, the main character, I think, is pretty good. But I think you could go with a little more contrast throughout these, like, probably their bodies, their toes, maybe a little on his fur, that kind of thing. And then just more tonal variation itself, more work in of colors and things like that throughout the steel, the stone, so it's not like just blank slate. And then finally, the sword definitely needs to up its contrast. So that's my thought. But it's a cool vignette. I dig it. All right, Devin, Rubric Marines. Feel like the shading has more contrast from the highlights in person compared to the photos. So if it's washed out, I mean, it is. I think you still need more contrast. I still don't think they go down dark enough. If I doubled the current darkness you see in the photo, because, like, this light adjusted or something, I would still take it twice as dark. That's what I'd say. Other than that, my thought is the gold needs a lot more life and shading to it. The gold is very, very flat. So you definitely want to kind of bring some life into that. And then finally, the bases. They should be black rimmed, and you need to break up this yellow. The base is so very bright and so very eye-catching and distracting. I understand. Well, I'm going for a yellow sandstone. Okay, fine. No issue. Stipple in a bunch of brown, a bunch of ivory, and stuff like that. Like, you need much less of a surface to be a color to have it still read as that color. And it's too intensely yellow right now. So much so that it just completely draws your attention away from the miniature. The middle guy is more recognizable and readable than the outside, too, because he has the extra yellow fire stuff on top of his head. But I would absolutely, like, give some more shading there to increase the contrast, up the gold, black rim the bases, and then just go nuts stippling and stuff with some browns and sepias and whites and ivories on the base to get that broken up and to desaturate that yellow so it's not so eye-grabbing. Okay? That's my thoughts. All right. Jeff Bryant. Okay, so Jeff wants to know about his figure here of his docks that have gone native in the life. Comes questions on the faceplate, the weapon shaft wood, and just generally let him know. So let's take a look. Okay, so first of all, love the green on the scales. Think that looks really nice. I think that's great. I like the conversions and all that. Super fun. The hair looks good. You need a little more light right here. Let's talk about the two questions you asked about primarily, which is the silver faceplate. You got two options you can go here. One, you go for, like, sort of sky earth non-metallic metal and reflect that. What you could do there is go look at James Waffle's blog or his recent videos where he's posted the Game of Thrones miniatures. He does this on the back on their helmets all over the place. You could literally copy what he does on the back of their helmet, since it's the same shape as the front of hers. And you know, it's sort of a blue on top and a brown on the bottom with a horizon line in the middle. It's basically what's going on, and some, you know, sort of variance to it. And you could copy that. The other option is you could really push the silver to an extreme in True Metals, but take it all the way. Like, really get some darkness over here in these other areas, put some blue shading in, and then have basically silver and a T along the front. So that would be your other option there. As far as the wood of the shaft, I agree. It is boring. Brown is fine. What you need is some thin lines. So we need to grab our sharp brush, and we need to start tracing little lines in both ivory and black, then glaze brown over it, then do it again, then glaze brown over it. And that'll create a wood texture. I have a video on faking wood texture. You can go watch that. Also, this like red column needs to be a little more something happening. Like, it's just too red. It just looks like a big chunk of brick, but it still is missing. It wouldn't even like really be brick. We still need a little more than that. And then with your tufts, again, make sure you drop some wash in there, dry brush them, get them painted so they look like they match in there. So those are kind of your options. The other thing that jumps out at me is the skin tone's a little flat. Go back and see the previous examples of that I've called out as good skin tone, and that's what I would recommend. So, like, look at Maroc, look at Keith's, look at the Skull Taker, and so on and so forth. All right, Nick Smith, another Mistweaver face. Very popular. In the Living City. Okay, looking to practice brush control and contrast. Okay. And he said he used bigger brushes, which is awesome. Glad to hear that. Bigger brushes are good. There we go. Finally loaded. Okay. So my answer is keep going on the contrast. And we need to both push it more and smooth it out. So the green could still go a lot farther on our contrast. And the way you do that is you pop it way up roughly, and then you take your mid-tone green, you thin it to a glaze, and you glaze it back down. Green is wonderful for glazing. It's very transparent. So you can absolutely just glaze that back down and you're good to go. Same with the smoke. You probably want a mid-tone gray, some sort of glazes over that to really get that nice and smooth. Finally, on the eyes, if you're going to do little freehand eyes like this, they have to be perfectly balanced, which means you're not just drawing the eye. You go back with the green, you draw around it, then you go back with the white. People think like when you do a freehand element, you're just drawing the freehand element, you're done. It's not it. The key to good freehand is you draw the thing, then you push back in on the thing, and you re-edge it with a color that's out here outside the thing. Then you draw then you fix the thing inside, then outside, then inside, then outside, then inside, then outside. And you keep pushing and adjusting until it's exactly where you want it, right? So that's kind of my advice there. And then make sure there's a dark line around the eyes, so that way they look like they're, inset sort of holes in the helm. But yeah, pop that. Keep good work on the contrast. Glad to hear the bigger brush. Now it's just a matter of continuing to push. Okay. All right. Hello, Facebook. You can do it. There we go. All right, next up, Tom. First submission for the end of month review. Looking for the quality of the MM. Oh, that's how nice. We're doing this again. I apologize, everyone. Okay. Okay. Quality of the NMM, overall composition, and the base. So let's get into this. So the NMM is really good. I love it. You're using interference colors all over the place. Everybody can witness here the blue, the purple, stuff like that. That looks really nice. I mentioned earlier looking for a blue fade in the armor tone. This is exactly what I was talking about, right? This is great. So we have this white to this blue fade in the black armor. Add some visual interest, more color. Aces. Cloak looks good. Texture on the cloak looks good. This is such a great figure. You've captured it well. The skin tone here could use some more variation, some more tonal variation, especially around the side of her head where it's shaved. A little bit of light blue tone to see that, the hair is still there. It'd still be, the hair would still be there, even shaved down to the skin. And then a little bit more like rosiness or something into the cheeks, just to create some more variation. I understand she's battle ready. She's not wearing makeup, but human beings still have a lot of, redness in this area here around their face. So that looks really good. Now, as to the, your gold, the gold looks good. We need to pop up some of the high highlights where you've got a really nice transition. You're really using your midtones well. I like it. It's rich. What we don't have is those high pops. So like when we look at the lion shoulder pad, which is, again, I've talked about this stupid lion face. It's one of the hardest things to do in non-metallic. The key is mid-high here, and then you create like a light line here of bright white, bright white, bright white, bright white, bright white, bright white. So you have this light line of like pops where it's going across, right? Same, by the way, down here. You can have like some little light catches here. Pop this area here up to pure white. You know, something here. Just like a couple areas where it's really, really catching an absolute pure white in the tiniest little light catches, and that will do you a lot better. Okay? As to the base, so you got some stone. Browns, greens. You've already worked in some red, blue, and purple. Keep going. Washes, pigments. Stipple it on there. Take a big brush. Stipple ivory. Just jab at it and stipple some ivory on there. Take some black. Make some thin cracks. White edge them. Have some little green moss growing around the crack. Like, all of this stuff is what you want to do. Stone is out in nature. How to make it look more interesting? Google pictures of stones. Right? Just Google rocks in nature. And what you'll see is they're covered in color, right? As just, it's a riot of color because nature attaches to rocks. So you've got moss and dirt and weather and rain runoff and detritus and just, rust from the tones that are in there. So just everything. Just don't hold back. Work that stuff in, but in a desaturated, muted fashion. Multiple applications of wash, pigments, stippling. You just throw it all back and forth over top of each other. And what you get is a very random organic pattern that should hopefully deliver what you're looking for. Overall, very cool fig. All right, Emily, looking for feedback on the big night. Okay, so Emily, I'm going to tackle your stuff here that you asked and then kind of go more. So with the tentacles and purple, you want to mix in some flesh tone to get to a highlight. A pink flesh tone is better. Brown rose, beige red, salmon rose, a mid-tone flesh, a pink flesh, any of that. That's how you take them up and have them looking organic. Do the same thing on the suckers, okay? Your damage and your weathering looks really good. There is one thing I want to draw your attention to here on this part. All your hashes are the same size. This is the same as this, is the same as this, the same as this, the same as this. They're all moving the same direction. They're all roughly the same size. That's not natural. Some should be up angled. Some should be tiny dots. Some should be multi-scratches. Some should be a big long scratch. Some should be very short. Again, vary it. Your brain made it too random. Too ordered. Human brains want things ordered. You gotta break that habit consciously. So a little bit of like a little adjustment or scraping and scratching on those is good. Let's take a look back here at the freehand. On this one, I would kill these eyelashes along the bottom. You don't need them. They're just adding extra, like they just look messy. Just re-go over this with blue. Like, you could just mask this off and then spray again or whatever you want to do. You could go in there with a brush and just cover it over. I don't know what this dot is. I don't know what this big white square is. You'll have to help me out and say in the comments. I don't like it. I like the eye. I love the eye. Why is this white square here? Is this meant to be like the light catch on the eye? If so, it's way too big. These look good right here. These little spots you have. I like these. I don't like that. I just don't know what that is. Is it like a patch maybe? Yeah, I'm mystified on this one. You're gonna have to help me out with that. Symbol of like the dragon looks good. The rose looks good. On the metal itself, let's talk here. A little more variation. Go back in with your airbrush. Let's get some darker color laid up under here. And then, under kind of in the under areas, under here. Take some brown, black, like sepia or burnt umber or Daler-Rowney ink mixed with Payne's gray and give me some low shots. And you'll be good to go there. And then finally, on these like tubes and pipes and stuff like this, take some copper, give me copper pipes, give me a copper ring here, give me some copper elements in here. Take these pipes, make these matte paint. These shouldn't stay metal. These probably aren't metal tubes. Make these rubber, make this stuff rubber, all right, or whatever. Like change their color. Give me a dark gray or a dark red that's washed and very desaturated. That kind of stuff are just little visual interest elements, okay? And then as far as battle damage on the top goes, think very minimal. Let me get back around to the hole here, sorry. A lot of photos, but it's very pretty work. It's great. There we go. So just some very light scratches. Look back to the night that I reviewed very earlier in the month, like the second, the Helverin night, the one with the two cannons, the two auto cannons. That was, I think, the right way to go. Just those touches around the edge, Very minimal, very random. Every one of his little damage elements was different. And it was so super minimal. It had like a couple scratches, a couple wear points, a shrapnel blast. Just simple. And then a few little streaks and you're rock and roll. Finally, work a little bit of darker browns or maybe some rusts into the hidden areas here where things would be more recessed, where water would collect, even in the fist. And then we need to black out with some black pigment or ink stippling or something like that the end of this barrel a little more. It doesn't look as used as it should. So, with that being said, I think it's a really, really great night. I think you did an awesome job. So, I can't wait to see it in person later this month. All right, Dark Oath. Looking for areas or skills you should focus on to improve. All right, sure, Anthony. So your skin is really good. I like the variation there. We need to take the variation of the skin into the rest of the model. So the purple is quite flat. I don't have enough. You have like this little edge here, but I don't have enough other highlight or shadows. The bone, same thing here on the face. I need to see more variation across the bone, an interference color in the bone, working in on these knee pads, on these little skulls. All of that would be great. So more darkness there. My final element that I really noticed and wanted to call out was the sword. I don't know what the sword is meant to be. It's kind of green. It's kind of got some hashes. What were you going for? You'll have to help me out, Anthony. I'm not sure what the sword was aiming at, so give me some feedback on that. But yeah, the tonal variation on the purple, which I like the purple. I think that's cool. It really pops. But the tonal variation on it, the sword sheath here, the bone, that's the main thing I noticed. You nailed it on the skin. Skin looks great. Nice shading, good catches on that. I'm a fan. Just carry that level of variation out to the rest of your elements. All right, John Gallant with the bust. Okay. So let's talk about this. Try differentiating the shirt and shorts. Want to know if you pulled that off. Don't know the shirt color shouldn't reflect much of the pink. And any other suggestions. All right. The next steps are farther, faster, more. The pink reflection on the skin looks really good. That's working. The challenge here is I'm not sure you have enough of it in the fists. You're reflecting quite bright on the face, but there's not enough on the fists. As to the difference between the shirt and the pants, yeah, I suppose so, but we can go a lot farther. The hair, you need more tonal variation, higher. You're on an appropriate amount right now for a 28 mil miniature. You need to go up to bust level. Whereas, just more. Twice as much as this, and then twice as much as that. Okay, is what I need to see here. Also, we need good dark separation between these elements. Like, this green wrapping here is just green. What's going on here? I got nothing here. I need dark lines between, dark lines separating, popping the edge of the cloth. Same here. This is just green. I need this to be dark. I need light at the top. All that kind of stuff. I need a lot more variation here around her lower back, under her arms, and her back muscles. Her hair especially. Just more. That is always the key. Whatever you're doing, more. The hair, she's so big, the hair on her, you should be doing a lot of individual threads. Just lots of highlights. Settle in. You're going to be there for a while. Grab yourself a Snickers, buddy. Finally, with the tattoo, I get what you're going for because you're trying to say, she got this magic tattoo and now she can punch magic punches. Cool. I get the narrative. I'm just not sure I'd make it gold. Gold's true color is yellow. Skin's true color is orange. They're very close to each other. It doesn't really stand out. I would have just done the same tattoo in a more fresh blue-black ink. I think that's going to look a lot better. Complete honesty. So, just a thought there. But, yeah. Overall, I think where you're accelerating is really on the face. This is a great shot, a great angle. I think the pink reflection here is about right out here. You may want to deepen darker a few pieces of the energy and then bright white pop some of the edges or something to crackle it a little more. But, yeah, that would be my recommendations, John. It's a cool piece. It really is. It just, again, as with most of the time with busts, the answer is just more. All right, let's talk about a big bird and using this water effect. So he's going for a water elemental. I really have one primary piece of feedback for you. I'll talk about the metal question as well. The problem is this. You were trying to make ocean waves up his wings because he's made of water that's roiling. I get that. But I had to stare at him for a minute to get that. If I hadn't read your post, I wouldn't probably get that. And the reason is because waves don't work like this, right? Waves are not evenly spaced rhythmic things. Waves crash and roll back, and they're intermittent and they're uneven. You know, if you turn your white noise machine to waves, it doesn't just go shh, 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 over and over again, right? It's very intermittent, like your wipers or something. It's random because it's nature, and there's a lot of different things contributing to the wave, the size of the wave, the crest of the wave, at the space in between the waves, and that's what you need. It needs to be way more broken up. Right now, it just looks like stripes, right? I would also say you probably need more of like a turquoise color to actually add visual interest to it, especially where the wave is cresting up and looking more thin, right? So more of that like light shining through and making it that watery turquoise color. As far as the gold goes, I think it's fine. You could add a little more contrast to it, but yeah, I mean, you'd want to go. But I think overall that color choice is fine. I don't have any issue with it. So, but that's my main feedback, Stephen. If you do some more models like this in this sort of elemental themed army, try to break up your waves more. Like just Google pictures of waves crashing on the beach, and make it look like that. Okay. Ryan Easterling, working on Sea Elves. Feedback on the armor, think it's missing something. You're right, and I know what it is. It's missing its low tone. You need to get like a purple or a green or a sepia up into these shadows to counterbalance this red effect here. That's what's missing, okay? Other than that, we need a little more variation on the metals, so think about bringing in more, like, again, your metal just looks washed. Don't wash metals, you just ruin them. Carefully get it some inks in there or something like that. I think that is what you need. The ocean floor, yeah, I think it's fine. You got the right color tone there. You could do a little more, stipple in different sands, add a little more elements. Make sure you clean up the red right here around his foot. That's a little stain that shouldn't be there. But, you know, for the most part, I think that works color-wise. I think your base is fine. You could have more color in it. The ocean floor is generally a riot of colors. But, you know, that's probably my main feedback there. So, hope that helps, buddy. That's a cool looking model, and I really like the choice of the color for the armor. I think that's great. It's very unique, it feels very corally, basically, in color. Like, that's what they sort of enameled the armor to match, so I dig that. All right, Pete. Second entry into Everchosen. All right, Pete. So, here's what I will say. The armor is cool. I really love the color choice here. I just need more of the red plates to break it up and probably a little more variation on the gray. I don't have enough tonal variation. You could also, so like make some of these teeth the red or make some of the metal or something different. Just like break it up more. It's too much of the same color. I like where you have some of the red tone placed in the shadow. That's really cool. I'd like to see more scratches, hashes, dots, and scrapes and things like that. He is an orc. He gets in those kinds of fights. Same with the bone. I like the variation up toward the horns here. I want to see more of that carry throughout the miniature. One of the biggest challenges you have, and this is somebody who loves oversized bases, is that you never want the thing to be within 90% of the size of the height of the model itself and look like, this just looks like a big rock stuck onto a base, right? I know it's a big piece of bark or whatever. Because it's not connected. You see how you have all this shadow and space underneath? It literally just looks like you went and stuck it down and then stuck him on top. It doesn't feel like it's part of anything. If you halved the size of that rock and then built it into the world with dirt and stuff growing up around it, some vines, some placement, it would suddenly snap right into place and look perfect. Okay? So that's also, again, it's too much of just kind of the same color. When you have a big rock like that, break it up more tonal variation, more reds, greens, blues, purples, don't care, colors mixed in, right? Where it's a thing in nature. It's going to have moss growing on it, dirt left on it, all sorts of stuff like that. So you want to make sure you're capturing all those things. But overall, very cool entry. I dig him. I really like your color choice. It's so unique. It's great. It's a really great, cool, unique armor scheme. All right, Centaur. Interested in improving on the horse halves? Sure. So let's talk about the horse halves. They are flat. We need to vary it. More tonal variation. How do we do that? Well, option the first, you come in with your sharp brush and you make 1,000 little hash marks to simulate fur. I'll have a video on that someday. That's option one, where you kind of like literally paint in the fur. Dr. Faust did a video on this a while back. If you want to see it, he has a video on it if you want to see it in action. The second option is you come in and you apply lots of soft glazes to pop up the highlights, to create the satin sheen of a horse fur around the tops of his haunch and stuff like that, and up here. And then you shade way down here with deeper brown blacks to really capture that. Also, with a painted horse, these dots are way too similar size. Like 1, 2, 3, 4 dots basically being the same size. Too much. I would Google painted horses and try to vary that pattern more. Have them be a little different sizes. Have one have a big white splotch that's like that big, and then a couple little ones branching out from it, like, because you're clearly going for the painted horse thing, and it doesn't feel like it. So they need to be a little bit bigger and a little bit more varied in size. On the skin, by the way, I would glaze in a little more of your mid-tone. They're slightly over highlighted here on there. They go a little bit too hard and too sharp into white. So my advice would be glaze that out, smooth that out, and I think you're good. Okay. All right. Last up, we've got Ilya on August 1st, but I'll give you a pass this time. Again, ever-chosen entry, and next stage wants to know how can we pop it up. So the skin tone is good. We could go a little bit farther on the shading, especially in some of these muscles. Make it a little more even, a little more shaped to the muscle. Your biggest opportunity here, though, is with things like your metal. The back looks great. Back here, you capture it perfectly. You have a great run. Like, the front needs to look more like the back. And maybe that's just the angle of your photos that I can't see it. But the problem here is you go into this deep purple, but it's a really hard cut. I love your tones. You got a nice yellow highlight tone, goes into these reds, goes into dark purple. But it's such a hard transition. We need more of that low mid glazing to smooth that out. It goes too dark, too fast. Keep the darks, smooth the transition. I would say the same thing here on the cloak. Like on this, it's way too rough in these transitions. The gray to white, it needs more blending, more time smoothing. Our real opportunity is with our metal. The metal's very flat. They just look washed. Let's get control of that metal. Let's get some. So again, I have lots of videos on shading true metallic metal. That's true for the gold. That's true for the silver. A little more weathering, efficient use of some deep blacks for deep pits and cuts and scrapes and the shade of the metal. Browns and yellows to show the environmental light pollution and the old wear and weather of just like kind of this thing's been outside and exposed to the elements and it's starting to have that little patina on it. So more of that, I think, is definitely where you want to go. I love the face. I think that looks really nice. There we go. Go back to this picture. The other element that I'll point out is, again, as I've said 100 times, your gray stone is just gray stone. Make it different. More colors. Mix stuff in. So there you go. All right. So with that, we come to the end of the month. What I will say is I think this was a great month. I loved seeing all these ever-chosen entries. I'm so happy they did it. I think that's really cool. I watched the associated video. If I reference you to it, it'll be posted alongside this. If you have any further questions about feedback I gave you, you can sure pop it in the comments. If you want to join us on your hobby journey, links down below. I want to give a special thank you to everybody who's answering questions every day in the community. This community is meant to be a place of positivity, of celebration of the hobby. We never judge ourselves against others, only against ourselves and our past selves. We are always ready to extend a hand behind us on the road of hobby to help pull someone else forward, just as hands were extended to us to pull us forward. I know this sounds like a cheesy metaphor, but I really believe this. There are people who have helped me so much in my hobby journey, and I want to give that back. I want to help all of you. And I know this community is built upon that same ethos, and I'm so happy to see so many people sharing positivity, positive critiques, and feedback and answering questions. Please keep that up. Please keep this community great. You're all doing a wonderful job. So I am very excited to see what we get at next month. Again, sorry for the delay for this. Gen Con and then technical troubles. I recorded this whole thing once, and then it blew up and didn't record, so I had to do this all again, which, believe me, was a real low point for me. I'm not going to lie. But we got there, and I'm more excited about it. And on the bright side, now I know how this all works. So now we'll be able to do it going forward. Next month will be, again, just a little bit delayed off the start of the month because it's Labor Day, and that's Nova is right there over that holiday. But I promise I will get it up as soon as possible afterward. So keep those posts coming. And as always, I very much appreciate you watching this one. We'll see you next time.